where my host Will and I talk about something that we grew up with, something that we loved as a kid, some kind of media, and talk about how it's aged in the new decade. And this just turned 10 years old last week. This is going to be Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Before we get into that, though...
The movie.
Oh, yes, the movie. Not the video game by Ubisoft. Before we get into that...
Not the graphic novel.
Or the graphic novel. What have you been...
Although I will talk about both.
Yes. What have you been enjoying the last couple of weeks? How have you been?
I've been doing all right. There's been a lot of things coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Something that didn't just come out, but that I finished is I just finished all of Hunter x Hunter that I could on Netflix.
Oh, nice.
Netflix, it stops after season 4, so now I have to get a Crunchyroll subscription or something to finish it.
But, yeah, Netflix has been going hard on the animes recently. They have a lot.
Yeah, they've been trying to catch up, although several that I've tried to finish, like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and now Hunter x Hunter, they don't have all the seasons. And that can be really frustrating, but I usually just finish it on Crunchyroll, so I may have to do that.
Yeah.
And in terms of music, I listened in depth to the new Logic and Taylor Swift albums. The Logic album still wasn't my favorite, but it's certainly much closer to the Logic that I enjoy than, honestly, his last, 5,
yeah,
6 albums. I really liked him when he was just starting out, especially his album Under Pressure, and this album's called No Pressure, kind of as an homage to that. And there's even some songs that are duplicate names from that first album, and I thought it was pretty decent. It was not painful to listen to.
I liked it because it has deep elements, it has fun elements, it has deep and it just has so many different elements. It even has the Travis Scott type hard beat. So I appreciate it on many levels, the production, the music, some of the lyrics. A to Z just made me smile, and that's what I need right now. So.
Yeah, Dad Bod was really good. Soul Food 2 was good. And it kind of goes to show that when Logic is not... I hate to tell people not to be creative, because I love it when people are creative and experimental and are telling these narratives, but clearly he's better off when he's, just showing off his pen game and his technical ability over some good beats, compared to when he's trying to make something super abstract and conceptual. Yeah. And the Taylor Swift album, I always give every Taylor Swift album a try, even though I almost always don't like them. And I have to say that this one was, again, kind of similar to Logic, far better than her last ones. Listening to it, I could still think of plenty of other albums that I would much rather listen to that were in the same style.
Yeah.
But it was not painful. So that's what I've been doing.
Cool.
What about you?
Man, one thing I really have been wanting to talk about is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Speaking of nostalgia tests, nostalgic things, I definitely want to talk about this in depth on an episode, but DX, the remake, came out on Switch from the original, and I 100%ed that, 95%, whatever you want to call it. There was something stupid that would have taken me
just missing 2 legendaries, right?
No, I got those, but you have to become master rank, and it takes it takes so many points, and just doing rescue missions over and over. So I just wasn't feeling that grind. It's just for a title on the title screen, a little card. But yeah.
Almost all the way.
It felt so good. It was so stressful, the last 99 floor dungeons where they reset you to level 5. And I never did those as a kid. I was so bad at the game. The post game is one of the most difficult things I've done recently. And that's been awesome. And then I went back and started Sky, and I beat that this week, and I've been going through the post game in that now. And that game is that much better, and it's crazy how much easier they made the remake of DX, because they have a similar engine with there's all these things I forgot about, especially the AI, the gummies, leveling up, the party member stuff, all that is so much more brutal. And the random monster houses, you'll just spawn on the floor and there'll be a monster house right away. It's crazy.
Yeah, they tweaked some things in DX. I wasn't sure if it was because it was actually easier, or I'm just better at games now. Do you think that you'll wind up playing some of the other ones that came out?
Yes.
There were a bunch that came out that I wasn't conscious of.
Speaking of, I just bought Super Mystery Dungeon, which came out in 2015 on 3DS, and that game, people like it more than all the other ones. That's one of the best ones, and it's apparently the hardest. Also, people say the other one on 3DS, Skates to Infinity, it has like the best story and best soundtrack, but a lot of the like gameplay isn't as good. So,
Yeah. That's really cool. I picked up the remake too because I was also super fond of the original Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team, and I definitely didn't get as far as you, but I did finish the base game and do some post game, and I just really like having it on Switch. It's one of those that you can play docked or portable, and it's good either way.
and I love games that you can just like put on a podcast or a TV show while you're playing, and just I love those kind of RPGs.
Yeah. Are you having a happy hour right now?
Yeah, I have the most exciting drink I've had in my fridge in a long time. Banana bread beer.
Yeah, you got it.
Oh my gosh, by Eagle Brewery. And I think you recommended this to me. I like had to video chat you because I did not know what to pick. I'm not, in the
Yeah. Is that not the Wells one?
No, it's
Or did they change their name?
Eagle Brewery. I don't know where they're at. I wanted to do a first little sip though, because banana bread's one of my favorite food. It's literally my top 5. Do it. I don't know why, but here we go. That's really good. I mean, it tastes just like beer. Because I was thinking like bread, banana bread. Like bread is already kind of beer. It has those ingredients, yeast and flour or wheat kind of stuff.
Yep.
It's good though.
And I just looked it up, and Wells did change their name to Eagle Brewery, so it is the exact same one that I'm thinking of. Yeah, that's a weird experience.
It's good. One. Yeah.
I'm drinking something more basic. I went super basic today, and I have a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. And it won a blue ribbon, so it must be good, right? Got kind of...
Does it have like an abbreviation or something? Or is it just...
PBR.
Okay, because I don't know if I've heard of that before, but I recognize it.
Really? You made it all the way through college and never heard of it?
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think this was for me, it was always like Natty or Bud Light. That was like the college staple, I guess. But...
Yeah. Also college staples. It's got kind of a straw-esque taste to it.
Oh.
And, like, not a straw-esque taste, but like a straw aroma. Kind of like a hay or straw aroma.
Oh, I thought you meant like a drinking straw. I was like, ugh.
Oh no! Like hay.
Yeah. Okay.
And then when you taste it, it's just like a super light flavor. It's not that great by any means. But I had a couple in the fridge, and if I have to drink like a light beer, to me it's kind of the best of the light beers. So it is what it is. You definitely have something better.
Yeah, it's really sweet too. I've never had a beer this sweet in a while, or maybe ever.
Yeah, that one really is.
Wow, that's good.
All right, so what are we talking about today?
Oh, so this is started as a comic book series, and I've never read them, but they made it into a freaking movie 10 years ago. But it's basically a movie that combines comic books, video games, punk rock, romance, comedy, action, adolescence. It's just amazing. And we were both, I guess you were like 14, I just turned 13. One of my first 13, PG-13 movies.
Yeah, it was one of, I think this and like some superhero movies like Green Hornet and stuff like that were coming out around that time. Those were kind of like me like getting into more mature movies, and this was one that I really wanted to see.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about it, and I hadn't read the graphic novels at the time. I've only read the first one, Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life, but the concept just intrigued me so much. Like you said, all those things combined.
I think you got me into it, right? Back when.
Yeah, we watched it together for the first time when you came to visit one time.
Was it in theaters? Did we go to the theater, or was it just? I forget actually.
No, it was literally the week that it came out on like DVD and download and stuff. I think we downloaded it and watched it. So missed the theater release, but saw it right after that. So the series is by Brian O'Malley, and he made 6 graphic novels that all have various titles. I've only read the first one, I must confess, but they have a very unique. His drawing style is super unique. They were originally in black and white, and then eventually redone in color, and they have a lot of jokes playing off of the fact that they're like in black and white too as well. But yeah, covering all those same topics that Drew said, all mashed into one. Yeah, and then the series was so popular that it was made into a movie. but it very much feels like an indie movie. It came out the same year as the last graphic novel, and the movie kind of compresses the story of all the graphic novels into one.
That makes sense because it feels a little bit rushed, and you can kind of tell that it's like putting a lot of ideas into one movie.
Yeah, it kind of covers the skeletal story of the entire series into one. So, I haven't read all the graphic novels, so I can't say how good a job it does of that. But yeah, pretty impressive that they did that, and especially on with what they had to work with, it very much feels like an indie project.
And it's cool too, thinking about it as like a second, not to like, I don't know much about the creator of the comics, but like almost like a second generation graphic novel kind of experience where it's somebody who grew up with all the like popular comic books in like 80s and 90s. And then it's like almost like a love letter in terms of, you can see it in like Deadpool being very meta and aware.
Yeah.
In similar ways, even this movie, I think, comparing it to Spider-Verse, it almost does some things even more authentically and better, apart from like the art style, but just all the different nods to that kind of culture is really, really cool.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can feel that in the characters and just all the little details, like all of the flashbacks, like whenever Ramona is like recounting something from her past, it's the actual art from the comic books. Yeah, and just like all the little like letters that they put across the screens and the 8-bit text that pops up all the time.
There were so many things. Like one thing I noticed this time that I hadn't before was like, like one of the band members got excited and they pointed and they wrote pee on the screen where he had like peed just a little bit on his jeans. It's like little things like that through the whole movie that you'll miss. I've seen it like 6 or 7 times and I never caught that before.
Yeah, I was noticing new things. I hadn't seen, the last time I saw it was like 2 or 3 years ago, so rewatching it again for this, again, noticing more little references to different games. They bring up a lot of NES games throughout the whole thing. I had seen this before, but just like the Zelda and Final Fantasy music that's like weaved in throughout.
Yeah, all the sound effects. Also, to precursor this, we're not going to go into like huge spoilers until later on in this podcast, so feel free to listen on, and hopefully we can convince you to give it a chance in the fact that it holds up, or show that, paint that picture. There are obviously like pros and cons as anything, but also just to go over quickly the film read that they did with the cast. This was probably the best thing I've seen Zoom used for, and I'm sure Zoom has been used for like much more important world things, but to me this was like the best thing I've seen with Zoom, where they got literally the whole cast, almost the whole cast, and they like read I've never been interested in like script reads ever. Like I know it was a thing in my college, they would do it for like Star Wars, just like our club, the radio show club. But this was like really compelling and really cool to see.
Oh yeah, and it's amazing that like almost all of the actors were there for it, because a lot of them have blown up a lot. So Michael Cera plays the lead, Scott, but and like at the time, I think Michael Cera already had his biggest roles from like Arrested Development and Juno and Superbad, but a lot of the other ones, like, they hadn't peaked at that time. Like Chris Evans is in it, and he wasn't Captain America yet. He didn't have Knives Out yet, but I love that he like came back. Like he totally could have skipped out on this one because he's so much bigger now, but he came back for the cast read and just like shows how much they love it. And like Aubrey Plaza and Anna Kendrick and Brie Larson's in Marvel now. Just crazy like what everyone went on to do afterwards, but they're in this like wild, quirky, geeky little indie film.
And it's cool, it's even set in Canada, and I love like the slight references. Like what is at the end, one of the characters is like, what, you don't have your Canadian sensibilities, don't appreciate my American club or something crazy, like something stupid, but like, and then one of the best things is like the Amazon.ca. Like, how do you spell Amazon?
Amazon.ca.
It's great.
Man. That was one of the things that I loved most when I was younger watching it, and now like rewatching it, I picked up on a lot of other themes that I didn't before that I'll talk about later in the spoiler section. But one of the things I loved so much was the writing and the wit and the jokes, because it has like good pop culture and geek culture humor, and then also just straight up like, this is just really funny dorky humor too.
Oh my gosh. Like Michael Cera, I loved Arrested Development. I think I got into it a little bit after this, definitely my favorite comedy show. I'm rewatching it right now, and
Nice.
I just like it's a show that I'll just laugh out loud to, which doesn't get me much nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But like his just cringy, he just owns it. Like a lot of the things are super awkward, and I think one slant I have is like him being just a little bit too cringy during the romance scenes.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think he plays it perfect, and it's probably just him, but he's like a whiz at that kind of role.
Oh yeah, and that's like kind of most of his roles. So that could be a gripe is like lack of range, but I think it's forgiven because he just does it so perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of like you mentioned the romance stuff, this was something. So I was reading some various analysis today, and I guess a lot of this is lost in the movie, but apparently like one of the points of the novels is that he's not meant to be a good person or a completely lovable person, but he's meant to be a real person and a relatable person. So I think in that sense, they kind of nail that.
Yeah, I definitely want to like hit on that later because I noticed that wholeheartedly. And like you said, we watched it together for the first time. It was, it's almost cringy to say that like I was definitely more sheltered when I was like 13, but it was like I think the second or third PG-13 movie I saw, and I just remember really relating to him for sure, and like it being almost like it's not really a story of like adolescence, but in a way it has elements of that for sure. And I just
Definitely.
yeah, and
Even
but
though it's 22-year-old adolescents.
and it also is like one of the first movies in the like blockbuster, mainstream world that like kind of legitimizes the nerdy kind of subculture going on in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have another movie that I'll talk to you about in relation to that sometime, but skipping over that for now, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
And this was a time when like like up to this point, if you were into there's so many like there's Street Fighter references all throughout and all the fight scenes and stuff, and up to that point like early mid 2000s, like all that stuff was kind of frowned upon.
Yeah.
Like you were very much put into a box if you were in these things, and this kind of brings it all to light, and it still does poke fun at it a lot, but definitely kind of weaves it into all other parts of culture.
Yeah, I mean, even like the whole band, the main cast of characters being in a band, they kind of like I was in a band when I was 13, like the biggest quote unquote band you could ever give. And I just think it's hilarious, those kinds of like self-aware jokes of like, oh man, maybe somebody cool can wear a shirt someday, and like those like little things that like make it all worth it.
Oh yeah, and like watching it this time, and this is something that this is one of those things that I didn't pick up on as much as before, but the struggle of like you doing something that you love, but you doing it on such an amateur level,
Mm-hmm.
And like getting excited over every little milestone and things like that, and not really being taken seriously and things like that.
Oh yeah, like when he shows his girlfriend early on, like, oh yeah, I grew up right here, and it's like right next to his like his like adult like.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many gags that like I didn't think would hold up that well, and a few of them don't. Not gonna lie, like I think some of the stuff with Wallace was a little bit.
I was watching that, and when I was younger, I thought a lot of that was hilarious.
I know, me too.
And now I still like do find a lot of it really funny. But then I also like listen to some jokes, and I was like, man, that would like not be written now.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like when they were doing the cast read, I mean, all these actors are 10 years older, and they were saying, oh, hopefully we'll see you in another 10 years. And some of the jokes were so like just not even just like the whole, not that they're just offensive, but just like they're not even like funny like nowadays. I think it's also like the adult, in us, and also the way culture is gone. But I thought it was funny for some of those.
Mm-hmm. I did find that like 98% of them held up, and like even ones that I forgot, like the garlic bread is my favorite food. Bread makes you fat. I died when I saw that again.
That and like the vegan, some of those are like my two favorite parts. And they're so stupid, but just like what kind of movie? I mean, I guess there's a lot of comedies out there, but most are more relatable. This is like a comedy that's so unrelatable that it's funny.
Yeah, definitely a lot of the parts are like so awkward you want to get away from, but then also a lot of it I even find relatable because I've definitely had moments that are mere images of a lot of the things that Scott goes through, like in
Hmm.
trying to talk to people and stuff.
Yeah, the stuff with Aubrey Plaza's character is hilarious too. Some even though like there's the stupid little like Seinfeld gag, and I didn't notice that. I didn't grow up with that show, but after watching it since then, some of those things are so funny yet like so like you
Hmm.
just want to shake your head and just it's so confusing.
Yeah, the Seinfeld gag, the Full House Scott and Wallace moment
Yeah.
with the canned laughter.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. And like also just like watching it so many times, some of the jokes that keep going and some of the foreshadowing is like you said, the writing is perfect. And my favorite thing is the cinematography. In terms of like some of the scenes have like super self-aware things like in the action fight with Chris Evans, they kind of have that like background that's like actually a physical background. I never noticed that before.
yeah. Oh yeah, they definitely parts of the budget like definitely bleed through, and also just like technology. Like this is a
Hmm.
decade old, and we weren't working with the same stuff, but you definitely see that in some of the like CGI and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
I think a lot of those, like you said, with the fake background and stuff, they play it off really well,
Yeah.
and it helps it hold up even today.
And one of my favorite things with the way the movie shot is like, especially early on, the transitions between the scenes are so captivating and creative. And it reminds me of Stranger Things because they do that in that show as well sometimes.
Oh yeah. I think it might even surpass that in this one,
Hmm.
just with like it's almost never just a hard cut and it's never just a fade. It's always that they'll throw up some text and then it'll be a swipe, and it'll just like the way that it carries and the music at those moments is just
Mm.
it's genius.
Yeah, the flow and like you really get intimate with Scott. You're almost like in his psyche and like going through his anxiety and his like the way a girl or like a concert or like the band can kind of get into his head and like totally distract him. And it's really interesting how it kind of can subtly be deeper and also it's just fun. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Uh what was I thinking? I had something to play off of that. Never mind.
And you mentioned the music too. Like it has so many love letters, and I'm sure you know more about like the punk scene. It's kind of getting at. I mean, I partly do too, but
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Just like they really capture like being in like an up and coming band and like a struggling band that you're just like you're rehearsing and then every little gig you get and yeah the references there were more video game references than music references that I noticed,
hmm.
but you know, still some good ones in there. Some of my favorite scenes were always when they were at like the record store and like digging through CDs and stuff like that, because like I've had that experience myself and just like able to relate to that super well.
And the party too when he like asks for like the Coke Zero and just like as he's talking to people and I don't know. It's the whole thing deals with social anxiety with a lot of different characters, honestly, and just like I mean, ultimately, it's kind of about relationships, and I think that's kind of where it succeeds in terms of it holding up. Is the deeper stories it tells, the slight like moral of the story in certain places.
Hmm. Oh yeah, it's not because like if they just wanted to build like an homage to like geek culture, they could have done a much better job of that, even
Hmm.
though this is like incredibly good. But what I think makes it like succeed as a movie is, like you said, it has that deeper story under it, and the everything else is just the wrapping of it that draws you into it and enhances that story, but it still has this romance and coming of age beneath all that.
Yeah, this is
Speak
something. Oh no, go for it.
Oh, speaking of that, I remembered the other thing that I was trying to say, and that was how many people do you know who've seen the movie and really like this movie, and seen the movie and don't like this movie?
Yeah, I was gonna say I've watched it a lot. It's one of my like all time. It's just a classic because it is one of those like first more adult movies I've watched. Not that it's like that crazy, but I watched it with my sister and she didn't get it, and then I watched it with Caroline. I think I did. I'll need to ask her. And she didn't like love it either. And I think that's one issue I would say in terms of it holding up which I would like to get to kind of soon before we like talk about the spoilers, just to like close that chapter of it. But I think it is a little bit. It doesn't quite hit close to home, but it is so great for that community that it like because it's written by somebody that knows what it's like on the inside of it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's definitely for in terms of like my friend circles. I feel like I know more people who've seen it than like a lot of people. It's just that like a lot of my friends have happened to see it, and we used to like in college we would always show it to a lot of people and stuff. And my of the people I know who've seen it are incredibly split. Like they either absolutely adore it or they really don't get it or can't stand it.
Yeah.
And I think it just like depends on how much you're able to read into that narrative and how much you're able to relate to all the references and stuff in terms of how much you enjoy it. But I kind of like that. I almost wish that more movies were like that. I think that too. I mean, obviously, we know of some amazing films that like are almost universally adored and are just masterpieces of storytelling and animation or acting and whatever. But I feel like a lot of movies kind of just wind up in like smack in the middle where it's like just like mediocrely decent. Like everybody watches it, they're inoffensive, you know, you all kind of get the message, plain and simple. Like I feel like too many movies hit the mark on that, and that's something that, and this also portrays it too. It's kind of like low to mid budget indie nature of it is like it does something very unique, and it does that unique thing very well. So whether that resonates with you is how much you like it or not. And I really appreciate that about it.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked it up a little bit, and I think we knew this too going into it, but it really flopped in the box office, but it really got a lot of critical acclaim, you know.
Yeah. So that's like what like when it was out in theaters before I eventually rented it when it came out on DVD. That was something I was like I've been seeing the trailers for this movie. I like the concept. Is this something I should go see? And all the reviews I read, or almost all of them, were really good, but then nobody went to see it. I think it was in my local theater for like not even 2 weeks. It was just a general flop. But I think it's like I said, the people I know who love it really love it, and I think that legacy has held up. And clearly, all the actors love it too, and it was something special for them.
Yeah, it's honestly like a wholesome and like just fun, lighthearted kind of movie. Like it really does a lot of different things. Like even if you look at the different acts of the movie, like the speed and the like flow is so good. It's just so engaging, and there's always something like, which is kind of like a video game. Like it's so captivating on like so many levels. You know, writing, video, music, not gameplay, but like action. And I think that's why it's so popular with like critics and the fans of it and the actors, is because like it's so unique, and that's what like critics like, because their job is to go see like 5 movies a week. So when they see one that's like so different and so self-aware, they praise it for doing something that's not, like you said, in the middle.
Yeah, for sure. Now, is this where you want to get into some of the more intricate story details?
Yeah, let's do it. So at the end, we'll go over some questions, but I guess
up until the last few minutes, spoiler warning.
Yeah. So, I think the biggest thing we can get into is like definitely the relationship with Ramona and Scott, and me going through a relationship and like growing up and growing older, I guess the same age as Scott or a little bit older than him. Definitely it sits with me way differently than like I did. You know, I used to like look up to him more, and now it's like I can kind of see parts of myself in that.
Yeah, definitely. So he's like a college or post-college age kid. So definitely like that. So this is the first time that I have seen it, because before I watched it in high school, and then I watched it in college, and this is actually the first time since then that I've actually been past that phase of life. So it was really interesting to look at it through that perspective.
Totally.
Like, oh, I just got past this point, even though I still very much relate to a lot of the struggle in it.
Yeah, and I think the main takeaway for me is just like, and I've been so analytical since having all this like time with lockdown and getting into like dissect and really like seeing media as more of an art form than in the past. But I think the main theme is just like dealing with your past and the scars from relationships and healing, even though it's like through the most crazy way of like battling all of her exes, you know.
Yeah, that was something that so like mentioning before, I really loved this movie for its wit and its humor and its references and its action. But this time, and like I always loved the deeper story behind that romance before. But the one thing that stuck out to me the most this time was like Scott has this like trauma from his past, and that's what's influencing his current actions, many of which were pretty crappy. So that was also, this is the other factor that didn't I didn't recognize before, and that I'm recognizing now after like having my own relationships and making my own mistakes in relationships, is like what a crappy situation like Scott put a lot of girls through. and and like what was I thinking? So before, when I was younger, I more empathized with him on that field, and I was like, oh man, he just wants to like love people and like have a girlfriend and stuff like that. And now I'm more like, man, you should have like really treated Kim that way, or Knives that way, and even to a certain extent Ramona that way.
Totally. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is at the end he dies when he's just chasing love, but then he wins based on self-respect. And that was like what it almost makes me tear up just to say that out loud because it's so profound.
Oh yeah.
And
it is. Yeah.
It's crazy. And like, yeah, I noticed so much, like even in the stupid joke he told after they like had their first date where he was like, can this not be a one night stand even though I didn't get any? Like, that's such a douchey thing to say, but like as a kid I didn't even like pick that up, that was like self-referential of probably the writer of the comic books. Not maybe, I bet he wrote that line. I bet they used that from the comics. So to assume that he's like, that's something that you would only be able to like say if you know, it's such a you know what I'm trying to say. It's so deep.
Yeah, it's very self-aware.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things is towards the end in that like final fight scene. So after he dies, when he comes back, one of the things that he does is three of the girls that he's dated are in that same room, and he like apologizes to all of them. And I think one of my favorite parts of this was something that I didn't, although I knew it was happening before I saw it on the screen, it didn't resonate with me before. And one of my favorite things now is part of that redemption arc is making amends with those people.
Yeah, totally. And especially the ending where like he doesn't quite get the happy ending, he gets another chance. And that's kind of the coolest thing is when you heal, it's almost like the classic Rebirth story. You know, I was thinking of it in terms of like so many other action movies and like, oh, the hero dies and then rebirth in terms of like getting the extra life. But in this movie, it's almost at the end of that where it's like he wins, but then he's dealt with those scars in Ramona and his past, and now he can like have a new ground to stand on.
Yeah, for sure. That is a good point, and something that I wasn't even thinking about when I was watching it this time, but you're making me think of that now, is that the ending is not an ideal ending. It's kind of a more real ending, you know? It's not perfect.
Yeah,
but
and
it's another chance.
And with that, I love the foreshadowing of the like him and Knives playing the Ninja arcade game where it's like the continue countdown, which is such a great. When I was young, like all I thought of was like, oh, that's a funny arcade reference, but it really is. Like the first time, he's like, hey, you should continue. We need to continue our relationship. The second time, he's like wants to break up with her, and he's like, I don't want to hit continue. And then the third time, the movie ends with the continue, and it's like, it's great.
Dang, wow. That is great. I didn't notice that. That's pretty awesome.
I mean, I might be reading into it a little too much because I am like super analytical, but
I mean, you picked up on a repeated theme, so it wouldn't surprise me if that was deliberate, you know?
Yeah. And I love too that not like I did say, like the Wallace and some of the Knives jokes were just like the Kung Pao chicken thing was like the worst joke I thought. That was just like what? But
yes, so that was one of the ones that made me uncomfortable, and definitely some of the gay jokes with Wallace made me a little, that all these I thought were hilarious before. But also, I don't think so. There's a lot of in our present day and age, as people are becoming more aware or more sensitive. I'm not sure. I really need to analyze that. Are people actually becoming more sensitive, or are they just becoming more aware that all this existed?
I think aware for sure.
and I mean sensitive. I don't mean like soft. I more mean sensitive to these issues.
Yeah, like I think
So,
I use the term sensitive as almost aware, in a way.
yeah, yeah. But I think in this film I excuse it more than a lot of like TV or movies
Mm-hmm.
because it's never really portrayed in a positive light.
Yeah.
It's never like this is a good thing to say or do. It's just kind of like, I mean, like in like the Kung Patrick, like that was like an antagonist. That was like that.
That was the baddie, yeah.
Yeah.
The
Uh,
only thing, like the thing too, is they do a good job. I learned recently the difference in like cultural appropriation and cultural exchange. They had
mm,
is it the Miyagi twins? I forget exactly their name, but they had like the
yeah,
dragon
those
they
two
were
twins.
battling with,
Yeah.
and they had the Bollywood guy, which that was a little bit cringy and just like a weird song. Um,
Mm,
and like knives being Chinese and like the schoolgirl element of it, like the Catholic conservative school, and all these things were realistic. Like in 2010, so many people made jokes like that, especially that were immature, and a lot of them didn't even go to college. Like it's not like it's not like it's doing it to put people down.
mm. Yeah. Like the Chinese schoolgirl thing, that is a bit of an extremity. But I thought what made that funny this time, and I'm not sure if you know this, but there are not many Catholic Chinese people at all.
Mm.
So to me, that was actually very funny because that's like a mashup of these two things that don't normally mix.
Yeah, and it just felt to me a little more authentic in terms of like the writers knew, or I guess the writer knew what he was getting into. And the other reason I don't have as much of a problem with it is because like Knives and Ramona have the most kick-ass like fight scenes, and like literally she's like using Scott as a puppet in one scene to fight, and
Mm.
Knives has this like badass like legit knives. Like when I was doing karate, somebody did have like the like knives weapons are those what she
Mm-hmm.
had, so it is like really authentic to Japanese and I guess Chinese culture. um
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I did feel like they were like this go around. I felt like they were stretching it a bit with Wallace at certain points. Like so
mhm.
much of his identity like was that,
Yeah,
but also again like my like excuse of it is that Wallace sometimes has like the realest dialogue in the whole thing, even if like his sexuality is like at such an expense through the entirety of the movie.
yeah, that's true.
Uh, but like sometimes he has like the most like soundest advice, the most sound advice, and like some of the realest commentary through the whole thing.
It was hilarious how many times people said you got to break up with Knives. Like 4 times I think they said it to him. It was crazy.
Oh yeah, the those repeated lines just became more funny to me this time, whereas before it was kind of the one-liners that were funny. Uh,
Hmm.
this time for me, I found more of the threads of humor to be more funny.
Yeah, like honestly, I was remembering the trailer, and like the one up scene was definitely in the trailer, and probably like
Oh
a
yeah.
Zelda reference. All of those weren't funny to me. They were like cool, but like I thought like the garlic bread thing, the vegan thing, the all clean, you'll be dust. Like that was a hilarious kind of
Mm-hmm.
moment. It almost felt like an SNL skit, like in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another one was with Michael Cera and Chris Evans this time. When he's trying to challenge him to like skate down that rail. He's like, can you do a thingy on that rail? And he's like, it's called a grind. Can you do a grind thingy?
Like everything is so intentional, and
Yeah.
oh, one more thing to close like the whole I guess like cultural aspect. I just think it's cool that they honestly like I of course I did relate to Scott, but I don't think I like grew up bad because of him. But he's like such a passive. I hate like his baggage, but I mean it's cool that even though he's the hero and he's like fighting Ramona's baggage, it kind of becomes Ramona helping him deal with his stuff at the same time. Like it's almost a
Yeah.
super equal movie in that way.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. They both have what they're going through, and they're both reciprocating in that way. And you even see that in the fight scene at the end.
Hmm. And there were a few references I didn't catch. One was I don't know if you can agree with this, but I think it was a super subtle nod to Amy in terms of her having pink hair and a hammer in the fight scene.
Yes, I did feel that way. Yeah.
That was cool. And the Final Fantasy baseline, I don't remember that, and I haven't played that game, but I thought that was something I did
Yeah,
pick
that
up
was
on.
that was during the fight with the twins and stuff.
Also, there were a few other things. I love
All
too
the
at the
coins.
end to also talk about like the girl stuff. I love how Knives, he was like something, she was like, no, go after her. And she was like, I'm way cooler. I'm too cool for you anyway. I thought that was like the most badass like feminist line that was like
Yeah.
so good.
Ooh, other references, like most of the band names are actually names of NES games.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, uh, shoot, like, like in the beginning, they say that they're playing against this band Crash and the Boys, which is Crash and the Boys from NES,
Wow.
and Clash at Demon Head was a Final Fantasy knockoff, and that's Scott's ex's band.
Mhm.
And then of course when they fight the twins, there's Two Dragons, and Double Dragon's a famous NES game.
Oh yeah, Sex Bob-omb, of course, which is like
Of
honestly that's like
course.
almost the pinnacle of the movie. If you just what's the, like two words you could use to describe
Oh yeah.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World? Sex Bob-omb.
Yep. Oh my gosh. I remember the first time that I heard that because I was super into Mario. I thought that was so crass, but honestly, it's like so
Yeah.
clever.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like the things I thought were so edgy. That oh man, like the one thing about like I just like hated watching him be like, we don't need to drink tea. Like that whole scene was just like really. But it also, I guess, it is
It's
good that it is hard to watch.
it is still it is like still pretty cringe, but it's also like been there, like
Yeah.
you know. Uh,
Uh,
yeah, I think that's what kind of sums it up. Is like it's not perfect, both in like quality and the characters and the character morality and stuff. It's like it's not perfect, but it's real.
yeah. Yeah, and a few movies do that. Like most of them show, and I hate the like the alpha male, beta male, but you have to admit they really like Scott Super is just like a super beta male.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But like most movies, it is Chris Evans, you know, and it's not this like cringy, relatable, nerdy teenager. Like I said, it was like a big deal, and still is. I think rare.
Oh yeah, and I think that's I think what we should talk about in a second of the big question of our podcast. But I think that's part of what can make it stand out still today is like not many movies are in this vein in what they do.
Yeah, I mean, I would like Spider Verse and what's another like comic booky movie?
Hmm.
It's like so many of them go like the what's the network that does like Flash and Riverdale? You know, so many of them go that route where it's like
Mm-hmm.
they're glamorized. Like honestly, Riverdale holds up way worse than this in terms of just like morality and messaging and emotion and reality. You know, of like even though he is like a really shitty male, you can learn so much from him, and he learns so much throughout the movie, and that's like way more important than just like a whole six pack. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, oh, and before we end this real quick, oh, I guess we can ask the question first. So, in your mind, does this hold up?
Yeah, I think it almost would hold up a little better than you would think with some of the people that used to would have judged it. Because I think when it came out, it was such a subculture, and so many people were like closeted nerds that didn't really like feel proud to be in the fandoms and in like into the things they were. So I think in that way, it's like kind of paved its way, and a lot like comic book movies are the most popular movies. And I think that's
Yeah,
happened since then, actually, right? Didn't Iron Man 1 came out in like '08 or '09, like around that time?
yeah.
So,
Iron Man was right before there were the failed Hulk movies. Right before,
hmm
uh, there was Superman around that time, and actually one of the characters, I think he was one of the evil X's, played like that flop Superman that came out right before this
hmm
era. And he was also in Chuck as well. Um, but yeah, just like you could in terms of like the action and stuff like that, you could reskin this as a superhero movie and people would eat it up. So I think
Yeah, and I
a
don't
lot.
think, even though some of the jokes are kind of like cringy or like wouldn't really hold up, like nobody's gonna be like butthurt over it. Like it's not like it's a super
Yeah, it's not so
offensive movie.
egregious.
It really it's a loving movie, and yeah, I mean I would definitely show this to my kids someday when they're of age. Like I think it's such a relic, but at the same time it has enough timeless elements in my opinion.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think some things date it a bit. like the animation and
Mm-hmm.
not in the art style, because I think the art direction is so amazing, but in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like the quality of it,
What's that
I,
computer quote? That's like one of the funniest things. Is like, wait, computers can do that or something like
oh
that.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that one wasn't even like computers could definitely, it was like, oh, it was like checking email,
Yeah, it
so
was.
like it could definitely do that at that time, but it just kind of more like them being oblivious to that.
Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, I thought it was so cool amidst our pandemic and our like constantly online, live streaming social media lifestyle. I thought it was so cool that they were so removed from that and they had like flip phones and like really, really old computers. I thought it was just refreshing that like people didn't know everybody's business all the time and they were like authentically talking a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, and definitely all the tech that they had in there was older than what you could have at the time.
Hmm.
But yeah, I did like that it was like a little bit. They still had the tech, but it was a bit more private, you know.
Yeah.
Like Knives and Scott were going to the arcade and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it, yeah, like even the concerts were super like not acoustic, but they were very raw.
Yeah. But back to what I was saying. I think it's ever so. There are signs of it being dated, but I mean, I watching it this time, I enjoyed it just as much as before, if
Hmm.
for different reasons, and I got new things out of it. So I would
Yeah.
say it definitely holds up. Oh, and before we go, I have to. I know that you haven't played this, but I used to really love the video game for this.
Oh wow. Yeah, I never played it.
And I have to bring this up because it's possibly coming back. So the same year that the movie came out, they put out a game, and the game is it's an 8-bit game, but the sprites are all the same style as the graphic novel,
Mm.
and it was a really good beat 'em up style game. And since 2014, it has been literally impossible to get
Wow.
because it was on the PlayStation and Xbox stores,
Hmm.
and then it got taken down in 2014. So
Mm.
you literally cannot get it. But recently, the creator of the series, recently tweeted at Ubisoft, and Ubisoft replied, and
Oh
they're
wow.
talking about re-releasing the movie as like a 10-year thing, and apparently the game might come with it. So
That's
that would be
sweet.
really cool. Yeah, but I'm glad that we both still enjoyed this.
One other little complaint. I just think the pacing gets a little bit rushed in terms of spreading out the fights with the evil X's around like the
Yeah,
yeah, like after like they
like
spread it out really
2/3 mark.
well, but I still do love the pacing overall. But that's like one little tiny gripe. And I always had when I even when I was 13 and watched it, I thought the same thing.
Mhm. Well, like I said, it is the entire series of graphic novels combined, so I guess it kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, but that was awesome.
man, that was so
Uh,
thorough. I feel so like man, I feel so nerdy, but in a good way. It's like
do you have any questions for us from our listeners this week?
yeah, this is from Caroline. She asks, "What's something you've learned about yourself this year?" Which could be a lot of things. It's been a crazy year.
Hmm. I think one thing that I've learned about myself is that I don't like to take accountability for the parts of myself that I don't like.
Hmm.
Like, I've had to be alone with my thoughts a lot this
Yeah.
year. And that's something that's been super challenging. And I'm trying to own up to that more. And, like, seeing Scott in this movie, this inspired me to that too, is like taking accountability for my actions more. I really want to actually go do a sensory deprivation tank because
Oh.
of all this, and kind of just like be devoid of all of that stimulus and just kind of think for an hour straight.
I thought about doing that right before the lockdown, like in February. I was thinking about doing
Nice.
that because I did acupuncture around the same time for an injury, not related. But something funny that reminds me of that is like I saw an ad on YouTube, and it was like, "Do you live in?" It was my county. Do you live in, this county and watch Joe Rogan? And I was like, "What? That's the most targeted ad ever." It was for
Oh,
some.
yeah,
It was
they
for those
knew.
tanks. It was sensory deprivation tanks.
They knew, man. Ah, wow.
Mine is probably just like I knew this, and my word of the year has been patience, and it's been with healing my back, and I'm like at such a good place with that, and I'm like keeping on, working out, exercising, walking a lot. The main thing with that is I feel like that's what got me into my back pain and my disc issues. So I feel like I've just been so aware, especially with like the more time and like living alone and doing more outings and like it's different being like a single adult going to like the grocery store than like with your family or friends or whatever. Anyway, I just noticed how hasty I am and how much that impacts so many parts of my life. Like, even with work, I feel like I don't do, like, quality work. I could, like, spend a little more patience and time to check everything before I, like, finish something. Even with this podcast, like, there's been a few slips of editing, and I just, like, keep getting hit by that over and over. And, like, driving, going to the grocery store, exercising, like, I just really need to slow down, and that's my thing, I think.
Yeah, that's good. So I have a question for us from my friend Billy. And he says, what is the best video game based on monkeys?
Super Monkey Ball! Easy.
Yo, that's definitely a contender, okay? But hear me out, all right? I was gonna say Super Monkey Ball, right? So let's think about the monkey franchises in games. So we got the Super Monkey Ball franchise, which is amazing. There was the good GameCube one. There was the DS one that
the DS one was good.
I kind of like that. It was different, but I definitely liked that one. I've actually they're porting it to Switch, and I thought about
that one is apparently the worst one. Actually, it has like a jump button, which is like sacrilege.
Yeah. There was also the Wii one.
That one was good. I had the one with the balance board, and you had to like be the monkey.
Oh dang. Then there's every Donkey Kong game. Okay.
Oh shit! I've made a huge mistake.
Okay. So like, all right.
Dude, I'm wearing a freaking Donkey Kong shirt, and I didn't think of that. And that's one of my favorite series. I played it when I was had my Game Boy.
So it goes beyond that though, right? So there's the Donkey Kong Country series, which are all the Donkey Kong side scrollers, right? You have the original 3, and then Donkey Kong Country Returns and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze.
Those are so good.
All right. Then you've also got Donkey Kong 64, which I know didn't really grip you, but it's one that I like a good bit, and a lot of people like. Then you got Donkey Konga, the rhythm game. Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, a racing game. Donkey Kong Jungle Beat.
Yo, Diddy Kong Racing is a great one.
Diddy Kong Racing on Nintendo 64 and on the DS. That's a lot of monkey games. Then you've also got Ape Escape. Then you've also got Zack and Wiki.
Yo, the Webkins monkey game. That was
the Webkins monkey game?
Honestly,
like, there's some
underrated.
hot monkey contenders out here. Whew.
Oh my gosh.
Man, it's tough to decide. I think in the end I have to go with Donkey Kong Country, but I just replayed that on the Switch SNES games.
It's on my list.
So I think in the end I have to go with that, but like Super Monkey Ball is a close runner-up.
Yeah, also just questions reminded me of something I've watched recently. I've watched 2 documentaries, which I would hesitantly recommend, that are nerd-related, monkey-related, and question-related. I've watched a indie documentary, I linked it to you, of the Brony fandom, which was by an inside Brony who contributed to the fandom heavily and went to all the conventions. And then I watched a legit documentary that just came out on the furry community.
Yo, very interesting.
I've learned a lot, and I'm trying to grow in my tolerance, because they're the butt of many internet jokes, so I wanted to be educated before I made them again.
That's good. I appreciate you trying to. I honestly need to do that. Like, I was thinking about this, and I'm like, I like to think of myself as a fairly tolerant person, right? But I've realized I'm very intolerant of furries. So that could be something that I could be more sensitive. Well, this was a good episode. One of our favorite topics. This was definitely one of my favorite things that we've covered.
Yeah. Very nostalgic.
Yeah, very good. But thank you for listening, everybody. We're on so many podcasting platforms now. I think we're on 6 different podcasting platforms, as well as YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram. I'm at West008 on both of those.
And I'm DrewJordan97.
Sweet. Tell your friends if you like it. Tune in next week for another great topic from late 2000s, early 2010s.
A good one.
And we'll talk to you next week.